This is the afternoon of the 6th of August, 2024. You know, if you watch my videos, I've said numerous times that aviation is an awful lot of fun. I also said it's unforgiving if you make the wrong mistakes at the wrong time. This is a clip put up by Pilot Debrief. It was published on the 4th of August. 64-year-old pilot makes heartbreaking mistake. Plays for 12 minutes and 26 seconds. Let's have a listen.
64-year-old pilot made a heartbreaking mistake and crashed when he was getting ready to land. Unfortunately, this was all that was left of the wreckage, and the investigation that followed revealed how tragic this truly was. That's why we're going to listen to what happened during the flight and talk about the mistakes that were made. I'm Hoover, and welcome to your Pilot Debrief. Thomas Posey was 64 years old, and he was the pilot flying the plane. He had a private pilot certificate with a single-engine land rating, and he was the only one on board the aircraft. Tom was the president and CEO of Lamaglass, a company that's been making fishing rods since 1949, and according to a company Facebook post, Tom died doing what he loved. Let me just say that one of the toughest parts of doing a pilot debrief is remembering that there are real people involved in these tragedies. That's why I try to treat every video that I make as if the family members are sitting in the room with me when I turn on the camera, because I know at some point they might watch this video and I never want to say something that I wouldn't be willing to tell them face to face. The reality is that we're human and we all make mistakes. And regardless of what actions the pilot took, the goal is to learn as much as we can from these tragedies so we can prevent future ones. And my hope is that Tom's family takes some comfort in that. According to the NTSB, Tom had about 600 hours of total flight time, but because they never recovered his logbook, it wasn't possible to know how many hours he had in the aircraft. My guess is that he had a decent amount of experience because when you look up the aircraft registration, you can see that Tom most likely purchased this aircraft around March of 2020, over 2 years prior to the crash. In order to learn a little bit more about Tom, the NTSB interviewed one of his good friends who was also his flight instructor. That instructor was an airline transport pilot with over 3,500 hours of flight time, and he had known Tom for over 40 years. He also had flown with Tom on a trip to Alaska about a year before the crash, where they logged about 30 hours in the accident airplane, and he accomplished Tom's most recent flight review. The aircraft Tom was flying was a 1976 Beechcraft V-35 Bonanza, which has a very distinct V-shaped tail. At one point, the aircraft was given the nickname the Doctor Killer because doctors and other wealthy individuals would buy them without getting the training they needed to handle a complex aircraft with retractable gear. One of the most famous crashes involving this type of aircraft happened way back in 1959 when Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper Richardson boarded a Beechcraft Model 35 to go to their next concert, and they crashed just a few minutes after takeoff. That incident became known as the day the music died. The pilot didn't have a lot of experience, and the truth about how all the holes in the Swiss cheese needed to line up for that to happen was pretty shocking. A more recent tragedy happened just a few years ago when an airline pilot and his new bride were flying in a Beechcraft S-35 and they crashed near Telluride, Colorado. Despite having over 5,000 hours of flight time, the pilot only had about 130 hours in the Bonanza, and he made a very tragic mistake. That being said, there's no evidence to suggest that Tom didn't know what he was doing. In fact, according to his instructor, Tom was an excellent pilot who was current and qualified. Additionally, the NTSB determined that there was nothing mechanically wrong with the aircraft at the time of the crash, and in my opinion, that's what makes this tragedy so heartbreaking. Tom wasn't being reckless. He just got in a bad position and he made a tragic mistake. Tom was flying out of Pearson Field in Oregon, and the most important thing you need to know about this airport is that it's located about 2 miles to the northwest of Portland International Airport. That meant Tom needed to be familiar with the airspace, and the fact that these two airports are so close to each other is going to play a role in this crash. As Tom got ready to take off, listen to his initial radio calls, and then I'll explain what's going on.
Pearson traffic, Bonanza 444 Papa Mike, preparing for takeoff runway 08 with easterly departure up the Columbia Gorge. Pearson traffic.
Bonanza calling on Pearson advised. Are you going to depart via the cutout before you head up the gorge?
Via the cutoff?
Yeah, are you going to go out the cutout before joining the gorge, or are you trying to go through Portland class Charlie?
ad popped up.
Well, there's the cutout. You want me to go through the cutout and then head up?
No, I'm asking you what you are wanting to do. Are you wanting to go out the cutout, or do you want to go through Portland's Charlie airspace and then talk to Tower through the airspace?
No, I want to go through Charlie, and I'll stay under 2,000 feet and just head up the gorge to Cascade, and then, or actually to Dallas and head over to Bend.
The first thing you need to know is that Pearson Field is an uncontrolled airport, and that means Tom doesn't need permission to take off or land. He's making all of those radio calls on an advisory frequency just in case there's other aircraft coming into or departing from Pearson. However, the Portland Tower monitors that frequency because Tom needs their permission if he wants to fly through their airspace. The magenta rings on this chart show that the Class Charlie airspace around the Portland airport goes from the surface up to 4,000 feet. But then you have this little cutout for the Pearson airport, which is what the controller was referring to. If Tom wanted to take off without talking to the Portland Tower, he could just stay below 1,100 feet within the cutout and depart to the north until he got clear of the airspace. We don't know what Tom's original destination was, but he wanted to depart to the east, and that's why he needed to talk to the controller to get permission to go through the Class Charlie airspace. Basically, Tom is doing everything right so far, and he got airborne a few minutes later and contacted the tower and listened to what happened next.
And for Papa Mike, can you recycle the transponder? It just seems to, it's not appearing operative at the moment.
Okay, I will do. When you say recycle,
Does it turn off and then back on? Is that possible?
I will do that now. I'm going to circle back. It's a little cloudy here, so I'm going to try a different way. 444 Papa Mike.
Or for Papa Mike Roger, just advise of your intentions.
I'm going to fly out to Vancouver Lake. I'm going to lose some altitude down below Charlie here, and then see if this clears. 444 Papa Mike.
In case you're wondering, the transponder is a device on the aircraft that transmits your position and altitude to air traffic control, and Tom had some problems with it during the flight. Now, I cut out a lot of the radio calls that they made back and forth about it, but I wanted to mention it because it was easily something that could have been a distraction for him, especially as he was trying to figure out what to do about the weather in front of him. The main reason he had to turn around was because he didn't have an instrument rating, and that meant he needed to remain clear of the clouds. That's why I thought he made a great decision, and he explained to the controller exactly what he was doing, and he was being conservative.
November 4 Papa Mike, we're to contact 3 miles northwest of the Pearson Field. Altitude indicates 1,000. Do you want to continue for the gorge as you had planned?
Just kind of wondering about the weather here. I thought it was 4,000, but it's a lot lower than that. 444 Papa Mike.
Number 4 Papa Mike Roger, and then just when able, say intentions, and if you want to just try to continue to dodge the weather, head back to Pearson, just advise.
I will do. I think I could get on top of it. Where is the cloud cover right now, 444 Papa Mike?
I don't have a report out that far. I can send you over to approach control. They have a little bit wider of a range out that they would be able to tell you probably what the cloud cover is based off of Pyrex if you'd like to go to them for a little bit.
Be great. Thank you.
Once again, Tom's doing the right thing. The weather was worse than he expected, and he was using the controller to try and find a solution. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and I'll say it again. Fly the aircraft first. Don't put yourself in a bad situation. You need to aviate, navigate, then communicate. The NTSB never provided any information on the clouds or the weather that was forcing Tom to turn around. Instead, they only reported that the lowest weather at Pearson Field was few clouds at 200 feet and the visibility was 1.75 miles. However, the truth is that the visibility was a lot better than that, as you're about to find out, and ultimately the NTSB said that weather was not a factor in this accident. Now, in my opinion, even though the weather didn't cause Tom to crash, I'd argue that if it wasn't for the bad weather, Tom most likely would have continued to his destination, and this whole tragedy might not have happened. Tom was told to contact approach control, but he most likely got distracted and he never did. Instead, he stayed on the tower frequency and started heading south.
Number 4 Papa Mike, are you still up on Portland Tower?
No. I think, what was that again? What was the code again for that tower?
Oh, but you're still on Portland Tower. You never switch over to approach control. I see you going southbound over Vancouver Lake. State your intentions.
I'm going to land at Pearson. 4 Papa Mike.
November 4 Papa Mike Roger, and you have Pearson in sight, correct?
Pearson inside, 444 Papa Mike.
November 4 Papa Mike, caution wake terminals, Portland still departing to the west. Radar services terminated. Squawk VFR, change to Pearson advisory frequency.
Squawking VFR, changing to Pearson advisory, 443, thank you.
Tom reported he had the field in sight, and he was over 3 miles away at that point, so we know that the visibility wasn't an issue. He switched over to the advisory frequency, and that meant he wasn't going to be able to hear Portland Tower talking to the airliners taking off or landing at Portland. Even though Tom took off using runway 8 going to the east, his plan was to land on runway 26 going to the west. And that's probably because the winds favored landing to the west, since that was the same direction that Portland was taking off and landing. Either way, Tom stayed below 1,100 feet to avoid the Class Charlie airspace, and he got ready to enter the pattern. Now we're going to look at the surveillance footage from the airport to see exactly what happened. But before we do that, I want to thank Adam for bringing this mishap to my attention. If you don't know who Adam is, he runs the Facebook page Aviation Accidents and Incidents, and that's where he shares all the NTSB preliminary and final reports. He also uploads those reports to the Pilot Debrief Discord, and if you want to be a part of the discussion or just be the first to find out when the NTSB reports are available, you should follow his page on Facebook or join the Pilot Debrief Discord, and I've included a link to both in the video description. The NTSB never mentioned this, but when Tom was flying south toward the airport, there was an airliner taking off from Portland to the west about 3 miles in front of him. Tom is about 900 feet and descending, the airliner is about 1,200 feet and climbing, so there isn't any risk of a collision. Unfortunately, Tom isn't on the Portland Tower frequency right now, so he never heard the tower controller tell the airliner that he had Tom in sight and that he wasn't a factor. We'll never know for sure if Tom saw that airliner out in front of him and maybe he got distracted. But for some reason, instead of continuing straight ahead to fly a normal pattern, he started his base turn early and he didn't give himself enough room for his turn to final. Unfortunately, that put him in a tough position because the Portland Tower airspace begins at the river, and Tom probably felt like he needed to make the turn happen to avoid flying into the tower's airspace. Instead, he should have just rolled out and gone around. Portland Tower might have called him if he violated their airspace, but it's better to get that call than trying to force a bad pattern. Tragically, Tom was only doing about 75 knots when he started the turn to final, and when he pulled back on the controls to bring the nose around, he exceeded the critical angle of attack, and this was a classic traffic pattern stall. Despite everything Tom did right earlier in the flight, this was a heartbreaking mistake, and my heart goes out to his family and friends, and I hope that others are able to learn from this. If you want to learn what happened to Buddy Holly on the day the music died, or what happened to the airline pilot and his new bride, then be sure to watch these videos on the screen, and thanks for your support.
Like I said, aviation's a lot of fun, but it's very, very unforgiving if you screw up. And he slowed the aircraft down, stalled, and it rolled in. I'll attach the link. Look at it, pass it along, and thanks for listening.